The night breathed violence. Caleb Morrison's hands trembled as he shoved another round into the Winchester, the metallic click barely audible over the chaos erupting around his Montana ranch. Splinters exploded from the window frame beside his head. Another bullet, another prayer whispered into the freezing darkness. Across the room, backlit by the dying fire, a woman moved with impossible grace. Naira. The Apache woman he had sheltered barely 36 hours ago now stood between his family and death itself. Her bowstring sang. A scream erupted from outside. One less hunter in the night. From the cellar below, a child's terrified crying pierced through the gunfire. Ruth, his daughter, 5 years old and caught in a war she could never understand. Caleb's vision blurred, not from the smoke filling the cabin, but from the impossible weight of everything that had led to this moment. He had thought burying his wife Helen 18 months ago meant burying the past with her. He had been wrong, dead wrong. The front door shuddered under a violent impact. Wood groaned. Hinges screamed. Naira's dark eyes met his across the chaos. No words passed between them, but understanding flowed like water in winter. Fight. Survive. Protect what matters. Another gunshot cracked through the Montana night. The door exploded inward. Everything went black. 36 hours earlier, the world had been different. Dawn broke cold and indifferent over the Riverside Ranch on December 15, 1879. Caleb Morrison woke at 5 o'clock as he always did, the habit carved into his bones by 2 decades of ranching. The cabin held on to night's chill despite the embers still glowing in the stone fireplace. His breath misted in the air as he swung his legs out of bed, feet finding worn floorboards that creaked their morning greeting. Helen's side of the bed remained cold. 18 months had passed since pneumonia took her, yet Caleb still woke reaching for warmth that would never return. He dressed in silence. Wool shirt, thick canvas pants, boots that had seen better years. The routine required no thought, leaving his mind free to wander into territories he usually avoided. Memories of Helen in this very room, her gentle humming as she braided her dark hair, the way she would catch him watching and smile that knowing smile. The secrets she kept even from him. Stop it, he told himself. The dead rest. The living work. The bedroom door opened with its familiar squeak. Across the narrow hallway, Ruth's door stood slightly ajar. Caleb paused, listening. Soft breathing. Still asleep. Good. The child needed rest more than she needed early morning chores. 5 years old, and she had already learned too much about loss. The main room of the cabin sprawled before him, shadows clinging to the corners where firelight could not reach. Simple furniture built by his own hands. A table scarred by years of use. Chairs that wobbled but held. Shelves lined with books Helen had insisted on buying even when money ran tight. The Bible sat prominent among them, its leather cover worn soft by countless readings. Caleb added wood to the fireplace, coaxing flames back to life. Heat began its slow crawl through the room. While coffee water heated in the kettle, he moved to the window and looked out at his small kingdom. 30 head of cattle in the east pasture, dark shapes against snow that glowed blue in the pre-dawn light. The barn stood solid, thank God, its roof patched just before the first snow. Beyond that, the river twisted through cottonwood trees, frozen solid now but still beautiful in its winter sleep. 15 miles to the nearest town, 8 miles to the nearest neighbor. Out here a man could think. Out here a man could hide from the noise of a world that asked too many questions. The kettle whistled. Caleb poured coffee into a tin cup, the bitter smell cutting through the wood smoke. He stood at the window, drinking slowly, watching the world wake up. A shadow moved near the river. Caleb's hand froze halfway to his mouth. He squinted through the frost gathering at the window's edge. There. Movement again, deliberate and careful. Too large for a coyote. Too cautious for a deer. He set the coffee down and reached for the rifle that lived beside the door. 7 years of peace on this land. But a smart man stayed ready for the moment. Peace ended. He pulled on his heavy coat and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a fist. 20 degrees below freezing, maybe colder with the wind that swept down from the mountains. His boots crunched through snow as he moved away from the cabin rifle held ready but not raised. No sense in appearing aggressive if this turned out to be a lost traveler. The tracks appeared 50 yards from the house. Not boot prints. Moccasins. Someone light on their feet, moving with purpose toward the river. Caleb's jaw tightened. Apache, most likely. This close to the reservation border, it was not uncommon, though most stayed well clear of white settlements these days. Too much bad blood. Too many broken treaties and broken families. He followed the tracks to the riverbank. There, among the frozen rushes, he found the evidence. Fish bones cleaned and arranged neatly on a flat rock. Someone had been here recently, using this spot to eat, to rest, to hide. Caleb knelt studying the scene. No blood, no signs of injury, just careful, methodical survival. Whoever this was, they knew how to live off land that offered little in winter's grip. He stood slowly scanning the cottonwood grove across the frozen river. Nothing moved, but he felt eyes on him, certain as sunrise. Someone watched from those trees. For a long moment, Caleb considered calling out. Instead, he turned and walked back to his cabin, making sure his movements appeared unhurried, unthreatened. The watcher had not stolen from him, had not threatened his home. Out here, that counted for something. Out here, a man learned to let some mysteries rest, but he would check his livestock more carefully from now on. Ruth was awake when he returned, sitting at the table in her nightgown, the doll Helen had sewn for her clutched tight against her chest. Her blonde hair, so like her mother's, tangled around a face that seemed too solemn for 5 years. "Morning, Ruthie," Caleb said, hanging his coat and leaning the rifle back in its place. "Papa." Her voice came quiet, always quiet these days. "You went outside without breakfast." "Just checking on things. Nothing to worry about." He poured her a cup of warm milk from the pot he kept on the stove. "How about we read a bit before chores?" Her face brightened, the first real light he had seen in her eyes for days. "From Mama's book." "From Mama's book," he agreed. They sat together at the table, Ruth's small body pressed against his side. Caleb opened the worn Bible, but this morning he chose a different passage, one Helen had underlined in the final weeks of her life. "Be strong and of good courage," he read quietly. "Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Ruth listened, her breathing slow and steady. After a moment she whispered, "We need to be strong. For Naira." "That's exactly right, sweetheart." Caleb closed the book and pulled her close. "Now let's get some breakfast in you." They ate quickly. Porridge with a touch of honey. Porridge with a precious spoonful of honey. The morning routine unfolded with comfortable familiarity. Caleb dressed Ruth in her warmest clothes, then led her outside to help with morning chores. The day passed in the rhythm of ranch work, feeding cattle, breaking ice on the water trough, checking fences that winter wind loved to damage. Ruth stayed close, chattering about small things, her doll ever present in the crook of her arm. Caleb listened with half his attention, the other half constantly scanning the tree line, watching for movement that never came. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the mountains, snow coming heavy by the look of it. Caleb worked faster, securing everything that needed securing. Ruth helped stack firewood near the cabin door, her small hands struggling with logs that seemed too big for her. "That's enough, Ruthie," Caleb said finally. "Go on inside and warm up. I'll finish here." She obeyed without argument, too cold to protest. Caleb watched her disappear into the cabin, then turned back to his work. 3 more loads of wood. Check the barn one more time. Make sure the livestock had shelter from the coming storm. The sun touched the mountain peaks, painting snow gold and orange. Beautiful. Merciless. Montana winter cared nothing for beauty or for the people trying to survive beneath its frozen crown. Caleb was carrying the last armload of wood when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind's low moan. A cough, wet and painful, coming from somewhere near the river. He dropped the wood and grabbed his rifle, moving quickly but carefully toward the sound. Full dark would fall within the hour. If someone was out there injured or sick, they would not survive the night. The cough came again, closer now. Caleb pushed through bare willow branches and stopped. A figure sat slumped against a cottonwood trunk. Dark clothing, long black hair, face hidden by shadows, even hunched over, clearly a woman. Her shoulders shook with another cough that sounded like it was tearing her apart from the inside. Caleb approached slowly, rifle lowered but ready. "Ma'am, you need help." The woman's head snapped up. In the dying light, Caleb saw her face. Apache, as he had guessed. Young, perhaps early 20s. High cheekbones, dark eyes wide with fear or fever or both. Blood stained the front of her deerskin shirt. She tried to stand, failed, collapsed back against the tree. Words tumbled from her mouth. Apache words Caleb did not understand, but he understood the tone. Desperation, pain, fear. "Easy now," he said, setting the rifle down and holding his hands up empty. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you injured?" She stared at him, breathing hard. Then, in broken English, "No soldiers, please, no soldiers. No soldiers here, just me and my daughter. Let me see where you're hurt." She shook her head violently, trying again to rise. Her legs would not support her. She fell forward and Caleb caught her before she hit the frozen ground. The blood on her shirt was fresh, spreading. Gunshot wound, he realized. Right shoulder, probably a day or two old and badly infected. "I'm taking you to my cabin," Caleb said firmly. "You'll die out here." "No. Dangerous. For you. Dangerous. More dangerous to leave you here." He lifted her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, her body burning with fever beneath his hands. "My daughter knows medicine plants. We'll help you." She tried to protest but lacked the strength. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her through the gathering darkness. Behind them the first snowflakes began to fall, erasing their tracks as if they had never existed. Ruth stood in the doorway when Caleb approached, her eyes going wide at the sight of the woman in her father's arms. "Papa, who is that? Someone who needs help. Go get the medical kit from the shelf and boil water. Quickly now." To her credit, Ruth did not hesitate. She ran to obey, her small feet pounding across the wooden floor. Caleb carried the woman inside and laid her on Helen's old bed. The sheets had not been changed since his wife's death. Some nights Caleb could still smell her there, lavender and wood smoke, and something uniquely Helen. Now another woman's blood soaked into those same sheets. Ruth returned with the medical kit, her hands shaking as she set it beside the bed. "Is she going to die like Mama?" "Not if I can help it." Caleb cut away the deerskin shirt, revealing the wound beneath. Ugly, red and swollen, leaking pus and blood. The bullet had gone clean through at least. That was something. "I need you to be brave, Ruthie. Can you help me?" Ruth nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Caleb painfully of Helen. Together they worked through the evening. Caleb cleaned the wound as gently as possible, while Ruth fetched clean cloth for bandages. The Apache woman drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out in her own language, sometimes lying so still Caleb feared she had slipped away. "Will she be okay?" Ruth whispered after they had done everything they could. "I don't know, sweetheart. We did our best. Now we pray." They ate a late supper in silence, neither with much appetite. The woman slept fitfully on Helen's bed, her fever burning bright. Caleb sat watch in a chair beside her, rifle across his lap. Not because he feared her, but because she had said the word dangerous. Someone had shot her. Someone might come looking. Ruth fell asleep on the floor near the fire, her doll tucked under her chin. Caleb covered her with a blanket, then returned to his vigil. Hours passed. The storm outside intensified, wind screaming around the cabin's corners. Snow piled against the windows. The woman's breathing grew worse, ragged and desperate. Near midnight she woke suddenly, her eyes finding Caleb in the firelight. "You help me," she said in halting English. "Why?" Caleb considered the question. "My wife used to say we're all just trying to survive the winter. Some winters are longer than others." The woman's eyes glistened. "Your wife? Where?" "Dead. 18 months now." "I am sorry." She closed her eyes, pain etching lines around her mouth. "I bring trouble to your home. I should go." "You're in no condition to go anywhere. Rest. We'll figure things out in the morning." She studied him for a long moment. "You are a good man, like my sister's husband." Something in her tone made Caleb lean forward. "Your sister?" "Dead now. Long time." The woman's voice grew softer, fading toward sleep again. They told me she'd die in fire. 10 years. I never stopped looking. What was your sister's name? But the woman had already slipped back into fever dreams, her lips moving soundlessly. Caleb sat back troubled. Something about this felt wrong, or perhaps right in a way he could not yet understand. He dozed in the chair, waking periodically to check the woman's fever and add wood to the fire. Dawn came gray and cold, the storm still raging outside. Ruth woke first, immediately checking on their unexpected guest. "Papa, she's still breathing. That's good, right?" "That's very good." Caleb stood his back, protesting a night in the chair. "You hungry?" They made breakfast together, the familiar routine providing comfort against the strangeness of having a wounded Apache woman in Helen's bed. Caleb fried salt pork and made cornmeal mush while Ruth set the table. Normal things. Safe things. The woman woke while they were eating. Her eyes were clearer this morning, the fever broken for now. She watched them silently, taking in every detail of the cabin. Caleb brought her water. She drank gratefully, her hands steadying around the cup. "Thank you," she said. "I am Naira. Caleb Morrison. This is my daughter Ruth." Ruth peeked from behind her father's leg, curiosity winning over shyness. "Hello." Naira's face softened. "Hello, small one. You have your mother's hair." Ruth touched her blonde curls self-consciously. "Everyone says that." "May I see picture of your mother?" Caleb hesitated, then retrieved the tintype photograph from the mantel. He handed it to Naira. Her reaction was immediate and violent. The tin cup fell from her hands, water spilling across the floor. Her face drained of color, eyes going impossibly wide. "No," she whispered. "No, this cannot be." "What's wrong?" Caleb reached for the photograph, but Naira clutched it tight. "This woman, your wife, what is her name?" "Her full name, Helen. Helen Morrison." "Why?" "Before Morrison. Before marriage." "What name?" Caleb's unease grew. "Whitfield. Helen Whitfield. She was raised by the Whitfield family after her parents died. Or so she always said." Naira began to shake. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the photograph. "Not died. Taken. Stolen. Made to forget." "I don't understand what you're saying." Naira looked up at him, her dark eyes filled with such pain that Caleb took an involuntary step back. "This woman," Naira said, her voice breaking, "my sister, my blood. They take us both when we are children. They tell her I die. They tell me she die. But she live, and I never know." The cabin fell absolutely silent except for the crackling fire and the wind outside. Ruth gripped her father's hand tight. Caleb felt the world shifting beneath his feet, everything he thought he knew about Helen suddenly thrown into question. "Your sister," he said slowly. "Helen was your sister." "My sister," Naira confirmed, pressing the photograph to her chest. "My sister, who I thought dead for 17 years. In the hearth, a log collapsed into embers, sending up a shower of sparks. Outside, the storm howled on, burying the Montana prairie under snow that would not melt until spring. And in a small cabin on the edge of civilization, 3 people sat together in the ruins of everything they thought they knew about family blood and the cruelty of men who stole children in the night. Caleb looked at his daughter, saw Helen's features in Ruth's face, and realized with dawning horror and wonder that the past had not been buried at all. It had only been waiting for winter to bring it home. The photograph lay on the table between them like an accusation. Caleb Morrison stared at his dead wife's face, captured in silver and shadow, seeing it now through different eyes. Helen Whitfield Morrison, the woman he had married 6 years ago, the woman who had borne Ruth and died without ever telling him the truth about who she really was. Across from him, Naira sat wrapped in one of Helen's old quilts, her fever broken, but her body still weak. The Apache woman kept touching the photograph with trembling fingers, as if afraid it might vanish like smoke. Ruth stood between them, confusion written across her 5-year-old features. "Papa, I don't understand. What does she mean about Mama?" Caleb pulled his daughter close. Give me a minute, sweetheart. I'm trying to understand, too. The morning sun climbed higher beyond the cabin windows, turning the snow-covered world brilliant and harsh. Inside, the fire burned low. Caleb had not added wood in over an hour, too stunned by Naira's revelation to tend to simple tasks. "Tell me everything," he said finally. "From the beginning." Naira wrapped the quilt tighter, her dark eyes distant with memory. When she spoke, her English came slowly, carefully, as if she had to translate each word from Apache before speaking. "New Mexico Territory, 1869. I am 12 years. My sister, she is 10. New Mexico Territory, 1869. I am 12 years. My sister, she is 10. Naira paused, calculating in her head. 10 years ago. I am 22 now. Helen would be 20 if she lived. Naira paused, pain flickering across her face. Our mother, she is Apache. Mescalero. Our father, he is white man. Trader. Name Eugene Whitfield. The name meant nothing to Caleb. Helen had never spoken of her father, claimed she had been orphaned as a baby. Another lie, another secret she had carried to her grave. Our mother die when Helen is 8, Naira continued. Fever. After our father he is different, angry. He drink much whiskey. Then he marry new woman, white woman from back east. Her name Margaret. Ruth shifted against Caleb's side. Like the mean stepmother in stories. Like that, yes. Naira's mouth twisted. Margaret, she hate us, hate that we are half Apache. She say we make her husband weak, make him look bad to other white people. She want us gone. Caleb could picture it too clearly, the prejudice, the shame that some white men felt about the children they created with native women. He had seen it before in other frontier towns, the way mixed-blood children were treated like mistakes to be hidden or corrected. One night, Naira said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper, men come to our house. 4 men. Margaret, she let them in. I hear her talking with them. Hear money. Hear her say, take the older one, the wild one. That is me. Child traders, Caleb said grimly. Naira nodded. They take me. I fight. I scream. Helen, she wake up, she run to help me. One man, he hit her, knock her down. I see her bleeding on floor. Then they put bag over my head. Take me away in wagon. Ruth had gone very still, her small hand gripping Caleb's shirt. He wanted to stop Naira to protect his daughter from this dark history, but he needed to hear it. Needed to understand what Helen had been running from all those years. They take me south, Naira continued. To place near border. Many children there, Apache children, Navajo, some Mexican, all stolen, all for sale. Her hands clenched in the quilt. I am there 3 years. 3 years of bad things. Things I do not speak about. Caleb swallowed hard. He had heard stories about the child trade that flourished in the lawless territories. Children sold as servants, as laborers, sometimes worse. The authorities did nothing. The newspapers looked away. It was easier to pretend such things did not happen. How did you escape? Soldiers come. 1872. They raid the camp looking for stolen army supplies. They do not care about children, but in the confusion some of us run. I run. I live in wilderness, moving from place to place. Afraid to go back to towns. Afraid to trust anyone. And Helen? Naira's eyes filled with tears. I go back to our father's house 2 years later. House is burned. Gone. Neighbors tell me everyone die in fire. Father Margaret, my little sister. All dead. I have nothing left. So I live with Apache bands who take me in. I learn to survive. I wait to die. The cabin fell silent. Outside a crow called harsh and lonely. Ruth pressed closer to Caleb and he could feel her trembling. But Helen didn't die in that fire, Caleb said slowly, pieces beginning to fall into place. Someone must have saved her, the Whitfield family that raised her. They lie to her, Naira said bitterly. Tell her family all dead. Tell her she must forget Apache blood. Become white girl. Become Helen Whitfield, orphan, good Christian girl. Her voice broke. They steal her memory, steal her past, make her ashamed of what she is. Caleb thought of Helen, of the way she had sometimes seemed sad for no reason he could name, the way she had refused to talk about her childhood, changing the subject whenever he asked, the nightmares that woke her, gasping in the dark, calling out names he did not recognize. She had been running from this, from the truth of who she was, from the sister she thought dead, and the childhood that had been stolen from both of them. "How did you find us?" he asked. "I do not find you. I find Helen's grave." Naira pulled a folded paper from her clothing, so worn it nearly fell apart as she opened it. "2 months ago I am in town, 30 miles south. I see notice in newspaper, death notice. Helen Morrison died September 1878, survived by husband Caleb and daughter Ruth." She laid the fragile newspaper clipping on the table. Caleb recognized it. He had placed that notice himself, his hands shaking as he wrote the words that made Helen's death official and final. "I come north to see grave," Naira said. "To say goodbye to sister I thought already dead. But when I get to churchyard I see date on stone. See she die only 1 year ago. I realize she live all this time. We both live. We both alone. And I never know." A tear dropped onto the table, then another. Naira wept silently, her shoulders shaking with grief too long delayed. Ruth pulled away from Caleb and walked slowly to Naira's side. The little girl reached up and touched the Apache woman's face, the gesture heartbreakingly similar to the way she used to comfort Helen during her final illness. "Don't cry," Ruth said softly. "Mama wouldn't want you to cry." Naira caught Ruth's small hand and held it against her wet cheek. "You look like her, so much like her. Everyone says that." Ruth tilted her head, studying Naira with the brutal honesty of children. "Do I look like you too, if Mama was your sister?" The question hung in the air. Caleb found himself looking at Ruth and Naira together, searching for resemblances. The shape of the eyes, perhaps, the straight line of the nose. But Ruth's blonde hair and pale skin came from somewhere else entirely. "Ruth," Caleb said carefully, "go check on the chickens. Make sure they have water." "But Papa, it's cold outside." "That's why they need water. The trough might be frozen. Go on now." Ruth recognized the tone that meant this was not a suggestion. She pulled on her coat and boots, casting one last curious look at Naira before slipping outside. When the door closed, Caleb turned back to the Apache woman. "There's something you're not telling me. Something about Ruth." Naira met his eyes. "You love her. I see this. You are good father. She's my daughter." "Yes. And no." Naira took a shaky breath. "Before I tell you, you must understand. Helen, she was good woman, but she was prisoner. Prisoner of people who stole her. Prisoner of lies they tell her." Dread coiled in Caleb's stomach. "What are you saying? Helen did not choose you, did she?" The question struck like a fist. Caleb stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Ruth was struggling with the chicken coop door, her small body straining against wood swollen by moisture and cold. So innocent, so unaware of the truths being spoken inside. "Her adoptive family arranged the marriage," Caleb admitted. "I needed a wife. She needed a husband to give her respectability. It was practical. And she was already with child." Caleb spun around. "How could you possibly know that—" Naira pulled another paper from her clothing. This one was a letter, the handwriting shaky and faded. "I find this in church when I visit Helen's grave. She leave it there. For me, I think. In case I ever come." She held it out. Caleb took it with hands that had begun to shake. The letter was addressed to Naira. "To my sister, if you still live," it began. "If you ever find this, know that I never forgot you. They told me you died, but I dreamed of you every night. I always knew they lied." Caleb's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to continue reading. "I am dying," the letter continued in Helen's familiar hand. "The doctors say I have weeks, perhaps days. I need you to know the truth about Ruth. She is not Caleb's daughter by blood. though he loves her as his own and does not know the truth. I lied to him. I had to lie. The words swam on the page. Ruth's father was a man named Casa, an Apache warrior I met in secret before the Whitfields forced me to marry. We loved each other, Naira. Truly loved. But they discovered us. They beat him and drove him away. I learned I carried his child after he was gone. The Whitfields were horrified. They arranged my marriage to Caleb Morrison, immediately told him I was pure and untouched. He is a good man, a kind man. But I could never love him as a wife should. My heart died with Casa. If you are reading this, please find Ruth. Protect her. Tell her about her real father. Tell her she carries Apache blood, our mother's blood. Tell her she is not alone in this world. Your loving sister, Helen. Caleb lowered the letter slowly. The cabin felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Everything he had believed about his marriage, about his daughter, about the life he had built was crumbling like old paper. "You are angry," Naira said quietly. "I don't know what I am." Caleb sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "She lied to me. For 6 years she lied. She was afraid. Afraid you reject the child if you know truth. I would never have done that. Never." But even as he said it, Caleb wondered if it was true. Would he have married Helen knowing she carried another man's child? Would he have accepted Ruth as his own if he had known from the beginning? He wanted to believe he would have. But honesty forced him to admit he did not know. "The man," he said finally, "Casa. What happened to him?" Naira's face darkened. "Dead. Killed in raid by soldiers. 1873. Same year Ruth is born. You knew him. He was of my adopted band. Young warrior, good man, brave. When he tell me about white woman he love, I am happy for him. I do not know this woman is my sister until now." Naira's voice cracked. "So much lost. So much stolen from us." The door burst open. Ruth stumbled inside, her face red with cold and effort. "Papa, I can't get the water trough unfrozen. It's stuck too hard." Caleb stood mechanically. "I'll handle it. You warm up by the fire." He pulled on his coat and walked outside, grateful for the excuse to escape the suffocating truth inside the cabin. The cold air hit him like a slap, sharp and clean. He stood in the snow, breathing hard, watching his breath form clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Everything he knew was a lie. His wife had not loved him. His daughter was not his blood. The quiet life he had built was constructed on secrets and half-truths. But when he looked back at the cabin and saw Ruth's small face pressed against the window watching him with worried eyes, he knew one thing remained absolutely true. He loved that child. Blood or no blood, lie or no lie. Ruth was his daughter in every way that mattered. The question was, what did he do with this knowledge now? He was breaking ice on the water trough when he saw them. Riders. 3 of them moving slowly across the white landscape about a mile distant. Too far to make out faces, but close enough to see they were heading in a direct line toward his ranch. Caleb's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Visitors were rare this far out, especially in winter. These men rode with purpose, not the casual pace of travelers. He finished with the trough and hurried back inside. Naira was teaching Ruth how to braid her hair in a pattern Caleb had never seen before, their heads bent close together in concentration. The domestic scene would have been touching if not for the riders approaching. "Naira," Caleb said quietly, "you said you were in danger. Who shot you?" Her hands stilled in Ruth's hair. "Men who steal children. Men who own camp where I was prisoner. When soldiers raid camp, they lose much money. They want revenge on those who escape. They hunt us. Are they still hunting you?" "Always." She met his eyes. "This is why I say dangerous. If they find me here, they will hurt you. Hurt your daughter. These men, they have no mercy." Caleb moved to the window and looked out at the approaching riders. Closer now, 1/2 mile. He could see they wore long coats and wide-brimmed hats, could see rifles in saddle holsters. "How many men are hunting you?" "I do not know. The leader, his name is Vernon Tully. He is old now, but still powerful, still angry. The name meant nothing to Caleb, but the description of old and angry and powerful painted a clear enough picture. Men like that existed all over the frontier, men who had built fortunes on the suffering of others and would do anything to protect their wealth and reputation. "Papa, what's wrong?" Ruth had noticed his tension. "Nothing to worry about yet, but I need you to do something for me. Go down to the cellar. Take Naira with you. Don't make any noise and don't come up until I call you. Understand?" Ruth's eyes went wide. "Are bad men coming?" "I don't know yet. That's why I need you safe. Can you be brave for me?" Ruth nodded solemnly. Naira stood her hand finding Ruth's. "I will not hide," Naira said. "This is my trouble. I will not let it hurt you. You're in no condition to fight. That wound could open again with any strain." Caleb checked his rifle, then the revolver. "Please, for Ruth's sake, if not your own, keep her safe in the cellar." Naira hesitated, then nodded. "If shooting starts, there is tunnel. Old root cellar from previous owner. Goes to barn. We can escape that way." "Good. Go now." He watched them descend the ladder into the cellar, Ruth clutching her doll and Naira moving carefully to protect her injured shoulder. When the trapdoor closed, Caleb pulled the rug over it and positioned the table on top. Not enough to hide it if someone searched thoroughly, but enough to pass a casual glance. Then he took his position by the window and waited. The riders came on steadily. As they drew closer, Caleb counted them again. 3 men, well armed, moving with the confidence of people who expected no resistance. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin. The leader, an older man with a gray beard and cold eyes, raised one hand in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. "Hello, the house," the man called. His voice carried easily across the snow. "We're looking for someone. An Apache woman wounded. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" Caleb stepped outside, rifle held casually but ready. "This is private property. State your business or move on." The gray-bearded man smiled without warmth. "My name is Vernon Tully. I'm a federal marshal working with the territorial government to apprehend fugitives from justice." A lie. Caleb knew it immediately. No marshal worked alone with only 2 men in country this wild. No marshal had that particular hardness in his eyes, the look of someone who had done terrible things and slept fine afterward. "Let me see your badge," Caleb said. Tully's smile widened. "Left it in my saddlebag. But I assure you I have full authority here. The woman we're seeking is dangerous. A murderer. She killed 2 men during her escape from lawful custody." Another lie, Caleb was certain, but he kept his face neutral. "Haven't seen any Apache women. Just me and my daughter here. Mind if we search your property just to be thorough?" "I do mind, actually. Like I said, this is private land. You have no authority here without a warrant." Tully's expression hardened. "Mr. Morrison, is it? I'd hate for this to become difficult. We could always come back with the army. Make this an official matter. Questions would be asked about a man harboring fugitives. Your daughter might end up in an orphanage while the courts sort things out." The threat was clear and ugly. Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle, but he forced himself to remain calm. "You're welcome to come back with proper documentation. Until then, you're trespassing." For a long moment, nobody moved. The 3 riders sat their horses, hands near their weapons. Caleb stood in his doorway, rifle ready, heart hammering against his ribs. Then Tully laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're protecting her. I can see it in your eyes. That's loyalty, Mr. Morrison. Admirable, but stupid. That Apache whore has been nothing but trouble everywhere she goes." "Last warning," Caleb said quietly. "Leave my property." "We'll leave, for now." Tully gathered his reins. "But we'll be watching. And when you make a mistake, when you let your guard down, we'll be back. That woman belongs to me. I've been hunting her for years, and I always get what's mine." The 3 men turned their horses and rode back the way they had come, taking their time, making it clear they were not afraid. Caleb watched until they disappeared beyond the ridge, then waited another 10 minutes to be sure they were truly gone. Only then did he move the table and lift the trap door. "They're gone," he called down. "For now." Naira and Ruth climbed up, the little girl looking frightened, and the woman looking resigned. "Vernon Tully," Naira said. "He come himself. This is bad. This is very bad." "Who is he really? Not a marshal. Owner of child camp. The man who buy me when I am 12. The man who beat me when I try to escape. He swear he kill me for what I cost him." Naira sank into a chair, exhaustion and fear written across her face. "He will not stop. He never stop." Caleb looked at Ruth, who had pressed herself against Naira's side, seeking comfort from the woman she now knew was her blood aunt. He looked at the barren winter landscape beyond his windows. He looked at his rifle, his home, everything he had built in this harsh and beautiful country. Then he made his decision. "Then we make him stop," Caleb said. "This is my land, my home, my family, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away." Outside, the sun climbed higher, cold and bright. The snow sparkled like scattered diamonds, and in the distance 3 riders paused on a hilltop, watching the small cabin below, planning their return. The storm was coming. Not from the sky this time, but from the dark hearts of men who refused to let the past rest. And in that small cabin, 3 people who had been strangers days ago prepared to stand together against the wolves gathering in the winter cold. The afternoon light slanted through the cabin windows, painting golden stripes across the wooden floor. Outside, the world remained frozen and silent, but inside something had shifted. The air felt different now, heavier with secrets spoken and truths revealed. Caleb Morrison stood at the stove, stirring a pot of stew with mechanical precision. His mind worked through possibilities, strategies, contingencies. Vernon Tully would return. That much was certain. The only questions were when and with how many men. Behind him, Naira sat at the table, wrapping Ruth's doll in scraps of fabric, teaching the child an Apache technique for making clothes without needle and thread. Their voices murmured softly, a language being built word by word between aunt and niece who had not known each other existed 3 days ago. "Like this?" Ruth asked, her small fingers struggling with the knot. "Yes, good. Now pull tight. Make strong so it not come loose." Naira's English improved each hour, as if the language had been sleeping inside her, waiting for a reason to wake. Caleb glanced over his shoulder. Ruth's face was scrunched in concentration, the tip of her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth exactly the way Helen's used to when she focused on a difficult task. The resemblance pierced him. Not because Ruth was not his blood, but because Helen should be here to see this. To see her daughter and her sister together, weaving the family ties that had been severed so long ago. "Papa, look." Ruth held up the doll, now dressed in a tiny deerskin outfit. Naira made her beautiful. "Very beautiful," Caleb agreed. He ladled stew into 3 bowls and brought them to the table. "Eat while it's hot. We need our strength." They ate in silence for a while. The stew was simple fare, venison and potatoes and wild onions, but it filled the belly and warmed the bones. Ruth ate with good appetite, but Naira only picked at her food, her eyes distant. "You need to eat," Caleb said gently. "That wound is still healing. You'll get weak again if you don't keep your strength up." Naira looked at him with something like surprise. "You worry for me, even knowing trouble I bring." "Trouble found us. That's not the same as you bringing it." Caleb pushed his own bowl aside. "Tell me about Vernon Tully. Everything you know. His habits, his weaknesses, how many men he usually travels with." "Why you want to know this?" "Because knowledge is how we survive. I need to understand what we're facing." Naira studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She took a small bite of stew, chewed, carefully swallowed. "Vernon Tully is old now, 62, maybe 63 years. But age does not make him weak. But age does not make him weak. Make him more cruel, I think. More desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Yes. He have much money once. Big operation. Buy and sell children all through territories. Apache, Navajo, Mexican, some white children too. Anyone he can steal or buy cheap." Naira's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "After raid and 78 soldiers destroy his camp. Take his records. Some men arrested. He lose everything. But not caught himself. He is smart. Always have other people do bad work. His hands look clean. But everyone know truth. He cannot operate like before, so now he hunt those who escape. He think we owe him, think we are still his property. Ruth had stopped eating, her eyes wide. Caleb wanted to shield her from this darkness, but she needed to understand why they had to be careful, why strangers were dangerous. "How many men does he have now?" Caleb asked. "I do not know. He have 3 with him today, but he can hire more. Drifters, outlaws, men who do bad things for money. In town he pretend to be respectable, businessman, maybe even marshal like he say if he pay right people." Caleb absorbed this. Money and false respectability were powerful weapons on the frontier where law enforcement was scattered thin and corruption ran deep. A man like Tully could buy his way out of most trouble, could hire violence with the ease of ordering supplies. What about the law? Real law, not bought marshals. Is there anyone who would help? Naira laughed a sound without humor. Law does not help Apache woman. Law does not care about stolen children if they have brown skin. You know this. Caleb did know it. He had seen it too many times, the way justice bent toward those with white skin and money. Still, he had to ask, had to explore every option. There must be someone, a judge, a territorial official who isn't corrupt. Maybe, maybe not. Even if we find such person, how long before help come? Days, weeks. Tully will not wait that long. She was right. They were alone in this, the way people on the frontier were so often alone when trouble came calling. No cavalry riding to the rescue, no last-minute salvation from distant authorities, just themselves and whatever courage they could muster. "Then we prepare," Caleb said. "We turn this cabin into a fortress and make it too costly for Tully to attack." "You risk much for someone you know only 3 days." Caleb looked at Ruth, who was watching this exchange with solemn attention. "Your family now. Helen's sister, Ruth's aunt. That makes you ours to protect." Something shifted in Naira's expression. Her eyes glistened, and she looked away quickly, blinking hard. When she spoke again, her voice was rough. "I do not deserve such kindness. I bring only danger. You brought truth. Sometimes that's more valuable than safety." Caleb stood, began clearing the bowls. "Rest while you can. When night falls, we start fortifying." The afternoon passed in quiet preparation. Caleb showed Naira where he kept his weapons and ammunition, explaining his defensive plan. The cabin had been built well with thick log walls and small windows positioned to give good sight lines in all directions. The cellar offered a last refuge if things went badly, with the old root cellar tunnel providing an escape route to the barn. Ruth helped where she could, carrying tools and fetching supplies. The child seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation without being told directly. She moved quietly, efficiently, her earlier playfulness replaced by careful purpose. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the snow in shades of orange and pink, Caleb paused in his work. He stood at the window watching the beautiful and brutal landscape and allowed himself a moment of doubt. Was he being foolish? He could still put Naira on a horse, send her north toward the Canadian border, eliminate the threat to his home and daughter. It would be the practical choice, the safe choice. But looking at Ruth sitting beside Naira, learning words in Apache that Helen should have taught her, Caleb knew he could not do it. Some things mattered more than safety. Some stands had to be taken not because they were smart, but because they were right. "Papa." Ruth appeared at his elbow. "Are you scared?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "A little, yes. Being scared is natural when facing danger, but we don't let fear make our decisions for us. Mama used to say that. She said being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Your mama was a wise woman." Ruth chewed her lip, thinking. "Naira is Mama's sister. That makes her my aunt, doesn't it?" "It does." "Then we have to protect her. That's what families do." Out of the mouths of children, Caleb thought. 5 years old, and she understood what it took some adults a lifetime to learn. Out of the mouths of children, Caleb thought. 5 years old, and she already understood loyalty better than most adults. "That's exactly right, Ruthie. Now I need you to do something very important for me. What? If bad men come, if there's fighting, I need you to take Naira down to the cellar. You know the tunnel to the barn, right? Ruth nodded seriously. If things go wrong, you two go through that tunnel. Take the gray mare and ride as fast as you can to the Hendersons' place. Tell them what happened. They'll help you. Can you remember that? Ride to Henderson's. Tell them to help. Ruth's eyes were enormous. But what about you, Papa? You'll come too, right? Caleb pulled her into a tight embrace, breathing in the scent of her hair, wood smoke and child sweetness. I'll do my best, sweetheart. But the most important thing is keeping you safe. You and Naira both. I don't want you to die like Mama. I'm not planning on it. Caleb held her at arm's length, looking into her eyes. But if something happens, I need to know you'll be brave, that you'll take care of each other. Ruth's chin trembled, but she nodded. I promise, Papa. Good girl. He kissed her forehead. Now go help Naira. She's teaching you important things. Pay attention. As Ruth scampered back to the table where Naira was weaving a small basket from willow strips, Caleb returned to the window. The sun touched the mountain peaks, now the light going from gold to crimson. Beautiful. Like blood on snow. He checked his rifle again, counted his ammunition. 40 rounds for the Winchester, 20 for the revolver. Enough for a sustained fight if it came to that. He had 2 more rifles in the cellar, older models, but still functional. Powder and shot for the shotgun, though he hated using it. Too much spread, too likely to hit something unintended. The light faded. Caleb lit the oil lamps, keeping them low. No sense in making the cabin an obvious target after dark. He moved through his home, touching familiar things. The chair Helen had sat in while nursing Ruth. The shelf of books she had loved. The quilt she had sewn during her final winter, her hands growing clumsier as the sickness progressed. This was worth defending, not just the physical structure but what it represented. Home. Safety. The life he had built from nothing in this harsh country. Caleb. Naira's voice drew him from his thoughts. She stood near the fireplace, Ruth asleep on the rug beside her, the child having finally succumbed to exhaustion. I must tell you something. About Ruth's father. Caleb tensed. What about him? His name was Casa. In Apache it means raven. He was young warrior, only 20 winters when he died. Good hunter, brave fighter, kind to children and elders. Naira knelt carefully, mindful of her healing wound. He loved your wife very much. When they discover their meetings when white men beat him and drive him away, he tried to come back. Try to reach Helen, but soldiers catch him in raid. Kill him. How do you know all this? I am there when he die. I hold his hand. His last words are about Helen and child he will never meet. Naira's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He make me promise. If I ever find his child, I will tell her about him. Tell her she come from love, not shame. Caleb looked at Ruth sleeping peacefully, her doll clutched tight. This child who he had raised as his own, who carried the blood of a man he had never met and a heritage he barely understood. She should know, he said quietly. When she's older, when she can understand. She should know about her real father. You are her real father, Naira said firmly. Casa give her life, yes, but you give her home, give her love, give her protection. That is what make father, not blood. The words settled something in Caleb's chest, a knot of uncertainty he had not fully acknowledged. Thank you for saying that. It is truth. I see how she look at you, how she trust you. That is not made by blood. That is made by years of showing up, of caring, of being there when child needs you. They sat in silence for a while, watching Ruth sleep. The fire crackled softly. Outside, full darkness had fallen, bringing with it the deep cold that made the log walls crack and pop. Tell me about Helen, Naira said suddenly. The woman she become. I want to know her through your eyes. Caleb leaned back, memories flowing. She was quiet, kept her thoughts to herself mostly. But she was strong, stronger than she looked. First winter we were married, we nearly starved. Crops failed, cattle got sick. Helen never complained once, just worked harder, made what little we had stretch further. She was always strong, even as child. She loved books. Reading, I mean. We'd go to town maybe twice a year and she'd spend whatever money we could spare on books. Novels, poetry, history. Said they helped her remember there was a world beyond our little patch of land. What else? She sang, not often and usually when she thought I wasn't listening. Old songs I didn't recognize. I realize now they must have been Apache songs from her childhood. Caleb's throat tightened. She tried to be a good wife. I know she did, but there was always this sadness in her, like she was mourning something she couldn't name. She mourned herself. The girl who was stolen, the life that should have been hers. I wish she had told me. I would have understood. Would you? Naira's question was not accusatory, just curious. Would white rancher in Montana understand wife with Apache blood, with child from Apache man, with sister who lived like savage in wilderness? Caleb wanted to say yes immediately, but honesty stopped him. Would he have understood? Would he have accepted it all without judgment, without fear of what neighbors would think, without concern for his own reputation? I don't know, he admitted. I want to believe I would have, but I can't say for certain. That is honest answer. I respect this. Naira shifted position, wincing slightly as her wound pulled. Helen protect you from truth because she love you in her way. Not as woman love husband maybe, but as friend love friend. She want you to have simple life, not complicated by her past. Well, the past found us anyway. Past always does. We can run from it, hide from it, pretend it not exist. But it wait patient. It come when we think we finally safe. The truth of this settled heavy between them. Outside, a coyote howled lonely and distant. Others answered their voices weaving through the darkness, hunters calling to each other, coordinating for the kill. Caleb stood and checked the windows again, peering out into blackness barely relieved by starlight. Nothing moved that he could see, but that meant little. A patient man could wait in the cold, watching, planning. You should sleep, he told Naira. Take the bed. I'll keep watch. We can trade. I watch first, you sleep, then we switch. Your wound is still healing. You need rest more than I do. My wound is nearly healed. I am strong. You will see. Naira stood to demonstrate, moving her injured shoulder through its range of motion. She still favored it slightly, but the movement was fluid, controlled. Apache women heal fast. We have to. No time for long recovery in wilderness. Caleb studied her. The fever had broken completely, the dangerous infection pushed back by whatever herbs and roots she had used. Her color had returned, her strength visibly rebuilding. In just 3 days, she had gone from barely conscious to functional. It was remarkable. All right, he conceded. 4-hour shifts. You wake me at midnight, no later. And if you see or hear anything unusual, you wake me immediately. Understood? Understood. Caleb carried Ruth to her bed, tucking her in with the gentleness of long practice. The child stirred but did not wake her, breathing deep and even. He stood watching her for a moment, this daughter who was and was not his, who had become the center of his world without him even realizing it. Then he moved to Helen's old bed, the one where Naira had been recovering. The sheets had been changed, but he could still catch a faint scent that might have been Helen's lavender soap, or might have been memory playing tricks. He lay down, fully clothed, boots on hand, on the revolver at his hip. The cabin creaked around him, settling into night. Through half-closed eyes he watched Naira take up position by the window, her silhouette dark against the faint starlight beyond. Sleep came reluctantly, bringing with it dreams of fire and screaming children of Helen running through smoke, calling for someone of Ruth, standing alone in snow that rose higher and higher around her small body. He jerked awake several times, heart pounding, before finally falling into deeper rest. When Naira shook him awake, he came alert instantly, hand going to his gun. Easy, she whispered. Nothing wrong, just midnight. Your watch. Caleb sat up, rubbing his face. 4 hours had passed like minutes. He felt gritty and unrested, but functional. Anything happen. Quiet, too quiet maybe. No animal sounds for last hour, like something scare them away. That got his full attention, Animals went silent when predators moved through their territory. Human predators often had the same effect. "Wake me at any sound, any movement, anything at all." "I will." Naira hesitated, then touched his shoulder lightly. "Thank you. For everything. For protecting someone you barely know. Get some rest. We'll need our strength tomorrow." She moved to the bed, lying down carefully. Within minutes her breathing had evened into sleep. Caleb took up the watch position, peering out into darkness that seemed to press against the glass like something alive. The night stretched on, measured in heartbeats and shallow breaths. Caleb's eyes adjusted slowly, picking out familiar shapes in the yard. The barn solid and dark. The chicken coop a smaller shadow to the left. The fence line marking the boundary of his cleared land. Then as the stars began to fade toward dawn, he saw them. Riders. Not 3 this time, but 6. Coming slowly across the snow, spread out in a line like beaters driving game before them. They were still half a mile distant, but moving with clear purpose toward his cabin. Caleb's pulse quickened. He moved quickly but quietly, waking Naira first. "They're coming. 6 riders, maybe 20 minutes out." Naira was on her feet instantly, all trace of sleep vanishing. 6. He bring more men. Should we run, take Ruth and go now while we have time? Run where they will chase, hunt us in open. Better to fight from strong position. Caleb knew she was right, but fear for Ruth gnawed at him. "Get her to the cellar. Stay there until I call clear, or until you hear me tell you to run. Those are the only 2 reasons you come up. Understood? Let me fight beside you. I am good with bow. I can help. Ruth needs you more than I do. If this goes wrong, she needs someone to get her to safety. Please, Naira, protect my daughter." Their eyes met in the dim pre-dawn light. Finally, Naira nodded. "I protect her with my life." "I know you will." As Naira woke Ruth and led her to the cellar, explaining in soft, calm tones what was happening, Caleb moved through the cabin, making final preparations. He positioned the second rifle by the east window, the shotgun by the door. Filled a bucket with water in case of fire. Moved furniture to create better cover. The riders came on steadily as the sky lightened from black to gray. Caleb could see them clearly now. Vernon Tully in front, recognizable by his gray beard. 5 others spread out behind him, all armed, all watching the cabin. They stopped just beyond rifle range, waiting, making their presence known. The siege had begun. The gray light of dawn revealed them clearly. 6 men on horseback spread across the snow like pieces on a chessboard. Vernon Tully sat motionless in the center, his gray beard catching the weak morning sun. The others flanked him at careful intervals, rifles resting across their saddles. They were close enough now that Caleb could see their faces. Hard men, the kind the frontier produced in abundance. Men for whom violence was a tool no different from a hammer or a saw, used when needed without hesitation or remorse. Caleb stood back from the window, using the wall for cover while he observed them. His Winchester was loaded and ready, but his finger stayed off the trigger. First shot fired would determine everything that followed. He needed to be certain before crossing that line. "Morrison," Tully's voice carried easily across the frozen ground. "I know you're watching. Let's talk like reasonable men." Caleb said nothing. Let them wonder. Let them worry about what waited inside these log walls. "I've got no quarrel with you," Tully continued. "You're just a rancher trying to get by. I respect that. But you're harboring property that belongs to me. Turn over the Apache woman, and we ride away peaceful. You have my word." The word of a child traitor and murderer, worth less than the snow it melted into. Still, Caleb waited. In the cellar below he heard nothing. Good. Naira was keeping Ruth quiet and calm. The child trusted her aunt completely now, and that trust might be what saved her life if things went badly. Tully shifted in his saddle, impatience showing in the movement. "I'm being generous here, Morrison. More generous than most men would be. That woman has caused me considerable financial loss. But I'm willing to let that go. Just open your door and push her out. Simple as that." One of the other riders, a younger man with a scar running down his left cheek, spat into the snow. "Hell with this talking, Vernon. Let me put a bullet through his window. See how conversational he gets then." "Patience, Marcus," Tully said, but his tone suggested his own patience was wearing thin. "Marcus!" Caleb filed the name away. The scarred man sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had killed before and expected to kill again. Dangerous. The sun climbed higher, turning the snow from gray to white to brilliant, blinding brightness. Caleb's eyes watered from the glare, but he did not look away from the riders. They had not moved closer, had not spread out to surround the cabin. That meant they were still uncertain, still weighing options. Good. Uncertainty was a weapon Caleb could use. He moved to the door and opened it 6 inches, staying behind the heavy wood. His voice carried clearly across the cold air. "You're on my land. Private property. You've got 1 minute to turn around and leave before I exercise my right to defend it." Tully's laugh was sharp and ugly. Big talk from a man alone with a child. "You think those log walls make you safe? We can burn you out, starve you out, wait until you fall asleep and then finish this. You can try any of those things. Some of you will die in the attempt, maybe all of you. Question is whether you're willing to pay that price for one woman." "That woman cost me everything." Tully's facade of calm cracked, showing the rage beneath. "Do you know what I lost when those soldiers raided my operation? $50,000 in assets, years of work, my reputation. All because that Apache bitch and others like her couldn't accept their place." "Their place as your slaves, you mean?" "I gave them food, shelter, purpose, more than they would have had dying in the desert." Tully's horse danced sideways, picking up on his rider's agitation. "But they ran. They cost me everything. And now I'll have what's owed to me, one way or another." Caleb heard the finality in those words. This would not end with talking. Tully had come for blood and vindication, and he would not leave until he got both or died trying. "Last chance, Morrison. Be smart. Think of your daughter." "I am thinking of her. I'm thinking she needs to learn that some things are worth fighting for, that family protects family no matter what." Caleb's hand tightened on his rifle. "You've got 30 seconds to leave. After that, anyone still on my land gets shot." For a moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then Tully raised his hand and made a sharp gesture. The riders exploded into motion, spurring their horses forward while raising rifles. Caleb slammed the door and threw himself sideways as bullets punched through the wood splinters, erupting into the cabin. The war had begun. Caleb rolled to the window and fired 3 quick shots, aiming for the horses rather than the men. Mounted targets were easier to hit, and a man on foot in deep snow was a man slowed down. One horse screamed and went down, throwing its rider hard. Another veered off, spooked by the near miss. Return fire shattered the window glass, forcing Caleb to duck below the sill. He crawled to the eastern window. Rose quickly fired twice more. Another horse stumbled through, whether from a hit or from panic, he could not tell. "Spread out," Tully was shouting. "Circle around. Don't give him clear shots." The riders dispersed, using the barn and outbuildings for cover. Caleb counted 4, still mounted, 2 on foot. The one whose horse he had shot was limping badly. Broken leg, maybe, from the fall. That man would not be a factor in the fight. Glass crunched under Caleb's boots as he moved between windows, tracking movement outside. A man darted from the barn toward the chicken coop. Caleb fired, missed, fired again. The man dove into the snow and stayed down. "Papa!" Ruth's voice floated up from the cellar, thin with fear. "Stay down there," Caleb shouted back. "Don't come up no matter what you hear." More gunfire, a sustained volley that punched holes through the cabin walls. Caleb dropped flat, covering his head as splinters rained down. The shooting stopped. In the ringing silence that followed, he heard horses moving, men calling to each other. They were repositioning, getting ready for another assault. Caleb reloaded quickly, fingers steady despite his racing heart. He had faced danger before. Mountain lions, angry bulls, one memorable encounter with a grizzly bear that had nearly ended him. But this was different. These were men who wanted him dead, who would kill Ruth and Naira without hesitation if given the chance. The thought steadied him. Fear could wait. Right now, he needed to be cold, calculating. a protector who would do whatever necessary to keep his family safe. A flaming arrow arced through the air and thudded into the cabin roof. Caleb's blood went cold. Fire was the nightmare scenario. These old dry logs would burn like kindling once properly started. He had minutes at most before the whole structure went up. He grabbed the water bucket and threw open the trap door. "Naira, they're trying to burn us out. I need you up here. Now." Naira emerged instantly, bow in hand. Her dark eyes assessed the situation in a heartbeat. "Ruth stays in cellar. We fight fire together, yes. Yes." They worked as a team without needing discussion. Caleb climbed onto the table and used a broom handle to knock the burning arrow loose, while Naira threw water on the smoldering wood. The arrow fell sizzling into the snow outside. 2 more arrows followed in quick succession. One missed entirely. The other stuck in the wall beside the door flames, licking at the logs. Naira doused it before it could catch properly. "They try to make us come out," she said, fitting an arrow to her bowstring. "Classic tactic. Burn nest, kill rabbits when they run. We're not running. No, we are not." Naira moved to the broken window and drew her bow in one smooth motion. The string thrummed. Outside, a man screamed. Caleb stared at her. "You hit him. In shoulder. He will not shoot fire arrows for a while." Her face was calm, focused. This was not the frightened, wounded woman he had carried inside days ago. This was a warrior defending her family. The siege settled into an ugly rhythm. Periodic gunfire kept them pinned down. Occasional fire arrows forced them to stay alert. But the attackers did not press a full assault. They were being cautious, probably because they had seen evidence that the cabin was defended by more than just a lone rancher. As the morning wore on, Caleb began to notice patterns. The man with the scar, Marcus, was the most aggressive. He kept trying to get closer, firing from different positions, probing for weaknesses. Tully stayed back, directing the others but not risking himself. Smart, but cowardly. The other 3 men varied in skill and enthusiasm. One seemed barely competent with his rifle, spraying bullets wildly. Another was methodical, taking careful aim before each shot. The third stayed mostly out of sight, which made him the most dangerous in Caleb's estimation. A patient shooter waiting for the perfect opportunity. "We cannot stay here forever," Naira said during a lull in the shooting. "They have food, water, horses. We have what is in this cabin. Few days, maybe week at most." "I know. But leaving means exposing ourselves in the open. In the snow, they would run us down within miles. So we need different plan, something they not expect." Caleb thought about this while checking his ammunition. He had used 12 rounds so far, 28 left for the Winchester. The revolver was still fully loaded. Not terrible, but not unlimited either. "What if we make them think we're weaker than we are?" he said slowly. "Let them grow confident. Lure them into a mistake." "How?" "You and Ruth go quiet. Stop shooting. I start firing wild, missing on purpose. Make it look like I'm running low on ammunition, getting desperate. They might get cocky, try to rush the cabin." Naira's eyes narrowed, considering. "And when they rush, we hit them hard. Close range where we can't miss. Break their attack, maybe break their will. Risky. If they all come at once, we might not stop them all." "You have a better idea." Naira was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "We try your plan, but first we prepare surprise for them, something to slow their rush." She explained quickly what she had in mind. Caleb listened, then smiled grimly. "Your people have been fighting longer than mine. I should have asked for your advice sooner. We learn from centuries of defending homeland against invaders. Sadly, we not always win, but we make them pay heavy price." Together they worked quickly while the attackers remained cautious outside. Naira had Ruth bring up all the rope from the cellar. They strung it across the doorway at ankle height, securing it to heavy furniture. A simple tripwire, but effective in darkness or confusion. Next, they scattered cooking grease on the floor just inside the door. Anyone who made it past the rope would find their footing treacherous. Finally, they positioned the shotgun on a chair aimed at the door, rigged with a string tied to the trigger. A desperate measure, but if things went badly enough to need it, desperation would be all they had left. "Now," Caleb said, "we make them hungry. He moved to the window and fired 3 shots in quick succession, all of them high and wide, nowhere near any target. He made his voice sound strained, frightened. "Stay back, I'm warning you, stay back or I'll shoot." A pause, then laughter from outside. "He's cracking," Marcus called out. "Hear that, Vernon? The rancher's losing his nerve." "Give him time," Tully replied. "Fear works better than bullets sometimes." Caleb fired twice more, equally wild. Then he made a show of fumbling with the rifle, cursing loudly. "Damn it! Damn it!" More laughter. The attackers were growing bolder, showing themselves more frequently. Marcus actually stood up from behind the water trough, exposing his full torso. Naira could have killed him easily. Her fingers twitched on the bowstring, but she held back, waiting, letting them think they were winning. "I think he's out of bullets," one of the other men shouted. "Vernon, I think he's done." "Don't be stupid," Tully said, but his voice held uncertainty now. "Could be a trick." "Only one way to find out," Marcus said. Caleb watched through a crack in the wall as the scarred man checked his rifle, adjusted his gun belt, prepared himself. This was it, the moment they had been building toward. "I'm going in," Marcus announced. "Cover me." "Wait for the others," Tully ordered. "Hell with that. The glory goes to the man who acts." Marcus stepped out from cover, started across the open ground toward the cabin. His rifle was raised ready, but his eyes showed anticipation rather than fear. He thought he was approaching a defeated enemy. He was 20 feet from the door when Naira rose smoothly and released her bowstring. The arrow took Marcus in the thigh, punching completely through muscle and sinew. He screamed and went down hard, his rifle flying from his hands. Before the other attackers could react, Caleb fired 3 careful shots that kicked up snow around them, forcing them back into cover. "Marcus!" Tully's voice was sharp with shock. "Marcus, get back here!" But Marcus was writhing in the snow, clutching his leg, the arrow jutting obscenely from his flesh. Blood spread dark against the white ground. "Help me!" Marcus screamed. "God help me!" Caleb felt a moment of pity for the wounded man, then pushed it aside. Marcus had come here to kill him, to take Naira, to destroy his family. Mercy had no place in this fight. 2 of the other attackers broke cover, running low toward their fallen companion. Caleb and Naira fired simultaneously. One man stumbled and fell. The other grabbed Marcus under the arms and dragged him backward, moving with desperate speed. They made it to cover, but barely. The man who had stumbled limped badly, blood soaking through his pants. 2 wounded now. The odds were shifting. "Enough!" Tully's voice boomed across the field. "Enough of this, Morrison, you've made your point. You can fight, but this ends badly for you no matter what. We can keep this up for days. Can you—" Caleb thought about his dwindling ammunition, his limited supplies. Thought about Ruth in the cellar, probably terrified despite Naira's presence. Thought about the long Montana winter stretching ahead and how many more men Tully could hire if he wanted to. Then he thought about Helen, about the secrets she had kept and the sister she had lost. About the chance, however slim, to give Naira and Ruth the family Helen had been denied. "I can keep fighting as long as I need to," Caleb called back. "Question is, how many more of your men are you willing to sacrifice?" Silence. Then the sound of horses moving, men arguing in low, urgent tones. Caleb could not make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. Tully's hired guns were reconsidering their commitment to this fight. Finally, Tully spoke again. "We're pulling back, for now. But this isn't over, Morrison. I'll be watching this place. The moment you step outside, the moment you let your guard down, I'll be waiting. You've made yourself a prisoner in your own home. Better than being your prisoner anywhere. We'll see how you feel after a week, after 2 weeks, after your food runs out and your daughter starts crying from hunger. We'll see how brave you are then." The sound of horses moving away, hoofbeats muffled by snow. Caleb watched them retreat beyond the ridge, Marcus slung across a saddle, the other wounded man holding onto his horse's mane with both hands. They were gone. For now. Caleb let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His hand started to shake, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. He set the rifle down carefully before his trembling fingers could drop it. "You did well," Naira said softly. She lowered her bow, the string going slack. "You fight with honor, with courage." "I fight with fear," Caleb admitted. "I'm terrified, but I can't let Ruth see that." Fear and courage are not opposites. Courage is acting despite fear. You show Ruth what it means to stand for family. That is greatest gift you can give. The trapdoor flew open and Ruth burst out, running straight to Caleb and wrapping her arms around his legs. "Papa, Papa, are they gone? Did we win?" Caleb knelt and pulled her close, feeling her small body shake against his. "They're gone for now, sweet pea. We're safe for now." "I was so scared. I heard shooting and Naira told me stories to keep me calm, but I was still so scared." I know. But you were so brave, staying quiet and hidden like I told you. I'm proud of you." Ruth pulled back to look at him, her eyes wet. "Will they come back?" Caleb wanted to lie, to tell her everything would be fine. But she deserved truth. "Probably. But we'll be ready. And we'll keep fighting as long as we need to. Because we're family. Because we're family." Naira knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on Ruth's shoulder. "In Apache we say family is like mountain. Storm comes, snow comes, wind comes. Mountain stays strong. We are mountain now. We stay strong together." Ruth looked between her father and her newly discovered aunt, something settling in her young face. A decision made, a line drawn. "Then I'll be strong too. I'll help however I can." "You already help," Naira said. "You give us reason to fight, reason to be strong. That is most important help of all." They stood together in the damaged cabin, sunlight streaming through bullet holes in the walls, glass crunching under their feet. Outside, the Montana winter blazed white and cold and beautiful, and somewhere beyond the ridge, Vernon Tully was regrouping, planning, preparing for the next assault. But in this moment, in this breath of peace between storms, Caleb Morrison stood with his daughter and her aunt and felt something he had not felt since Helen's death. Hope. Not the foolish hope that everything would work out perfectly, but the stronger hope that came from standing with people who mattered, fighting for something worth protecting, choosing courage over surrender. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and together they just might survive. 3 days passed in tense watchfulness. Vernon Tully and his remaining men had not disappeared. Caleb could see them on the ridge each morning, dark shapes against the snow, watching, waiting. They had made camp a mile distant, their smoke visible against the pale winter sky. Close enough to maintain the pressure, far enough to stay out of rifle range. The waiting wore on nerves more effectively than bullets ever could. Inside the cabin, the three of them fell into a routine born of necessity. Caleb took the night watches, his eyes scanning darkness for movement that might signal an attack. Naira watched during the day, her Apache-trained senses alert to the smallest changes in the world outside. Ruth helped where she could, fetching water from the well under armed guard, organizing their dwindling supplies, trying to be useful despite her fear. The cabin bore the scars of battle. Bullet holes pocked the walls, letting in thin streams of cold air that no amount of cloth stuffing could completely block. The shattered windows had been boarded over with planks torn from the barn, turning the interior dim and cave-like even at midday. They kept the fire low to conserve wood and avoid giving Tully's men clear targets from the smoke. It was the evening of the 3rd day when everything changed. Caleb was checking their food supplies, taking inventory with growing concern. Flour beans, salt pork, enough for perhaps another week if they rationed carefully. The chickens still provided eggs, but gathering them meant exposure. The cattle in the far pasture were unreachable, might as well have been on the moon for all the good they did. "We need a plan," he said quietly. Ruth was asleep in her bed, exhausted from another day of tension. Naira sat near the fire, sharpening her knife on a whetstone with slow, methodical strokes. "Plan for what?" she asked without looking up. "To wait, to run, to surrender. To break this stalemate before we starve." Naira tested the knife's edge against her thumb, nodded satisfaction, and set it aside. "Tully is patient man. He has supplies, he has time. He knows we do not. Then we make him impatient. Force him to act before he's ready. How? Caleb had been thinking about this for 2 days, turning possibilities over in his mind during the long night watches. There's an old trapper's cabin about 5 miles north near the base of Copper Ridge. Abandoned for years, but the structure was sound last time I checked. If we could reach it, we'd have another defensive position. Maybe enough confusion to break contact and head for the territorial capital. 5 miles through snow with child, with men hunting us on horses. Naira shook her head. We would not make it half that distance. Not in daylight, but at night in a storm we might have a chance. There is no storm. Not yet. Caleb moved to the window and looked out at the sky. Clouds were building over the mountains, thick and dark. But there will be. I've ranched this land for 6 years. I know the signs. By tomorrow night, maybe sooner, we'll have a blizzard. Heavy snow, high winds, the kind that makes a man lose his way 50 feet from his own door. Naira joined him at the window, studying the approaching weather system with experienced eyes. You are right. Big storm comes. But this makes travel more dangerous for us, too. It does. But we know this land. Tully and his men don't. If we can reach the tree line before they realize we've gone, we can use the terrain to our advantage. And if we do not reach tree line, if they catch us in open ground? Caleb had no good answer for that. In the open, on foot, burdened with a 5-year-old child, they would be helpless against mounted men with rifles. It would be a slaughter. But staying meant slow starvation or eventual capture when their ammunition ran out. At least running offered a chance, however slim. I think we should try, he said finally. But it's not just my decision. Ruth is your blood too. What do you think? Naira was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Helen chose safe life. She marry you, live quiet, hide her past. It keep her alive, but not happy. I do not want Ruth to live like that. Always hiding, always afraid. She turned to face Caleb directly. We run. We fight. We choose dangerous freedom over safe prison. Then we go tomorrow night, when the storm hits hardest. They spent the next day preparing. Caleb packed supplies into a canvas bag, taking only essentials. Food for 3 days, ammunition, matches and tinder in a waterproof pouch, a spare blanket. Everything else would have to be left behind. Naira fashioned snowshoes from wood and leather strips, working with quick efficiency born of lifelong practice. She made 3 pairs, sizing Ruth's carefully to fit the child's small feet. Walking on top of snow, not through it, she explained to Ruth. Very important in deep drifts. Ruth watched with solemn attention, asking occasional questions, trying to be brave despite the fear Caleb could see in her eyes. She understood they were about to do something dangerous. The child was too smart for comforting lies. By late afternoon, the wind had picked up, carrying the sharp scent of approaching snow. The clouds had descended until they merged with the mountain peaks, turning the world gray and close. The men on the ridge had retreated to their camp, seeking shelter from the coming storm. Perfect. As darkness fell, the first snowflakes began to drift down. Within an hour, they fell thick and fast, driven horizontal by wind that howled around the cabin corners. Caleb could barely see the barn through the white chaos, exactly what he had hoped for. We go at midnight, he told Naira. Gives the storm time to intensify, gives Tully's men time to settle in for the night. They tried to rest, knowing they would need every ounce of strength for what lay ahead. But sleep would not come. Caleb lay on his bed, listening to the storm running through mental maps of the terrain between here and Copper Ridge. 5 miles. Normally a 2-hour walk in good conditions. Tonight, in a blizzard with a child, it might take 4 or 5 hours. Maybe more. They would be exposed the entire time. If Tully's men spotted them, if they could not maintain their pace, if the cold became too severe. He pushed the thoughts away. Doubt was poison. They had made their choice. At 11:30, Caleb rose and began final preparations. He woke Ruth, gently helped her dress in every warm piece of clothing she owned. Layers upon layers until she could barely move her arms. "Papa, I look like a bear," she whispered, trying to smile. "A very warm bear." That's good. He tied a scarf around her face, leaving only her eyes visible. Remember what we talked about. You stay between Naira and me. You hold on to this rope. He tied a length of cord around her waist, the other end around his own. If you fall, we stop. If you get tired, you tell us. Understand? I understand. Naira emerged from the shadows, dressed for travel, her bow and quiver strapped across her back. She had blackened her face with ash from the fireplace, making her nearly invisible in the darkness. She did the same for Caleb and Ruth, the gray powder cold against skin. "Ready?" Caleb asked. Naira nodded once. They gathered at the door. Caleb took a final look around the cabin. His home for 6 years. The place where he had lived with Helen, where Ruth had been born, where he had built a life from nothing in this harsh country. He might never see it again. The thought hurt, but not as much as he expected. Home was not logs and roof boards. Home was the people standing beside him, ready to walk into a blizzard on faith and hope. "Let's go," he said. He opened the door, and the storm roared in a living thing of wind and ice and fury. Snow blasted against them with enough force to steal breath. Caleb stepped out into it, feeling Ruth jerk against the rope as she followed. Naira came last, pulling the door closed behind them. The world disappeared into white chaos. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Caleb could barely see his own hands in front of his face. The wind screamed like something dying, driving snow into every gap in their clothing. The cold was immediate and vicious, finding skin despite all their layers. They moved slowly across the yard, Caleb counting steps to maintain direction. 20 paces to the barn. Another 30 to the fence line. Beyond that, open ground for half a mile before reaching the tree line. The most dangerous part of the journey. Behind them, the cabin vanished into the storm as if it had never existed. Ahead, Tully's camp would be equally invisible. They were alone in a white void, 3 small figures against the fury of a Montana winter. Caleb checked the rope connecting him to Ruth. Still tight, still secure. He could feel her weight against it, could sense her struggling but keeping pace. Good girl. Brave girl. They reached the fence and climbed over carefully. The barbed wire was ice-coated and treacherous. On the far side, Caleb paused, getting his bearings. North. Copper Ridge was due north. He could not see anything, but he knew it was there. He started walking. Time became meaningless. There was only the next step, the next breath, the constant battle against wind that tried to push them backward. The snowshoes helped keeping them on top of the drifts rather than floundering through them, but each step still required effort. Caleb's face had gone numb within minutes. His fingers and toes followed soon after. The cold was beyond cold, a physical force that pressed against them from all sides. He found himself thinking about the warmth of the cabin they had left behind the fire, the shelter. Had to forcibly stop that line of thought. No going back now. Only forward. Ruth fell once, jerking hard against the rope. Caleb stopped immediately, turning back. Naira was already helping the child up, checking for injuries. Ruth was crying, he could tell from the shaking of her small body, but she made no sound. Brave, so brave it broke his heart. "Can you keep going?" he shouted over the wind. Ruth nodded. They pressed on. An hour passed, maybe 2. Caleb had lost all sense of time. His world had narrowed to the rope in his hand, the ground beneath his feet, the next breath drawn into burning lungs. He knew they should have reached the tree line by now, should have found shelter among the pines, but he could see nothing, recognize nothing. Terror began to creep in. What if he had gotten turned around? What if they were walking in circles, or worse, heading away from safety? People died in storms like this. Froze to death 50 feet from shelter because they lost their way. Found in spring, perfectly preserved in ice, their faces showing the final moments of realization that they were lost. No. He pushed the fear down. Trust your instincts. Trust the years of working this land. North is north. Keep walking. Something loomed out of the darkness ahead. A shape, tall and dark. Caleb's hand went to his rifle, then relaxed as he recognized it. A tree. Pine by the size and shape. They had made it to the tree line. Relief flooded through him so intense it was almost painful. They were not lost. They were on course. The trees provided some shelter from the wind, though snow still fell thick between the branches. Caleb led them deeper into the forest, following the slope upward. Copper Ridge was ahead. The cabin would be near the base, tucked against a rock outcropping, if they could find it. His foot caught on something buried in the snow, and he went down hard, landing on his shoulder. Pain flared bright and immediate. The rope jerked tight, pulling Ruth down with him. Naira was there, instantly helping them both up. Caleb tested his shoulder. Sore but functional. Nothing broken. He looked back at what had tripped him and saw the corner of a wooden structure poking through the snow. A fence post. The old corral from the trapper's cabin. They had found it. Caleb moved along the fence line until he saw the cabin itself, a low shape barely distinguishable from the surrounding darkness. The door hung open, one hinge broken. Snow had drifted inside, but the roof appeared intact. They stumbled through the door and into relative shelter. The wind still howled outside, but the walls blocked its worst fury. Caleb untied the rope connecting him to Ruth with fingers so numb he could barely feel the knots. "We made it," he said, his voice hoarse. "We actually made it." Ruth collapsed onto the snow-covered floor, her whole body shaking. Naira knelt beside her, checking the child for frostbite with practiced efficiency. "Her fingers and toes are good," Naira reported. "Cold but not frozen. Face is good. She will be okay." Caleb set about making the space livable. He used his knife to shave dry wood from the interior walls, building a small pile of tinder. His matches were in the waterproof pouch, still dry despite the storm. It took 3 tries with trembling hands, but finally a flame caught. The tinder smoked, then blazed. Within minutes they had a small fire going, using broken furniture and pieces of the old roof for fuel. The warmth was immediate and glorious. Caleb held his hands toward the flames, feeling sensation return as painful tingles. They huddled close to the fire, sharing body heat, letting warmth seep back into frozen limbs. Outside, the storm continued its rage, but they were safe. For now. "Do you think they know we are gone?" Ruth asked, her voice muffled by the scarf still wrapped around her face. "Not yet," Caleb said. "Storm is too fierce. They will be hunkered down in their camp, waiting it out. By the time they check the cabin tomorrow, we will have hours of head start. And then we keep moving. Put as much distance as possible between us and them. Make for the territorial capital. Find real law enforcement people Tully can't buy or threaten." Naira was staring into the fire, her expression unreadable. "You risk much for me. Your home, your safety, maybe your life." "Your family," Caleb said simply. "Family doesn't calculate risk. Family just acts." "Helen was lucky to have you. Even if she could not love you the way wife should love husband, she was lucky to have man who would sacrifice for her blood." Caleb thought about this. About Helen and their marriage of convenience that had become something more over the years. Not romantic love perhaps, but a partnership built on respect and shared purpose. She had given him Ruth, given him reason to build something lasting. That was its own kind of love. "I was lucky too," he said quietly. "She gave me more than she knew." They fell silent, watching the fire dance and flicker. Ruth had fallen asleep between them, exhausted beyond measure. Her breathing was deep and even, untroubled despite everything they had been through. Caleb looked at his daughter, at her aunt, watching over her with fierce protectiveness, and felt a complex tangle of emotions. Fear for what tomorrow would bring, pride in what they had already survived, and something else, something he had not expected. Gratitude. For this storm that had given them escape, for Naira's strength and skill, for Ruth's courage, for the chance to fight rather than surrender, to choose their own path rather than have it chosen for them. The wind howled outside, shaking the old cabin's walls. Snow drifted through gaps in the roof, melting near the fire. But they were together. They were warm. They were alive. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tully would pursue them, of that Caleb had no doubt. The journey to the capital would be long and dangerous. But tonight, in this forgotten cabin on Copper Ridge, they had won a small victory. They had chosen freedom over captivity, action over paralysis. and sometimes that choice alone was enough. Caleb added another piece of wood to the fire and settled back against the wall, his rifle close at hand. Naira did the same on the other side of Ruth, her bow strung and ready. Outside, the storm raged on into the night, covering their tracks, erasing their passage, giving them the gift of invisibility. And in the morning they would rise and walk toward whatever future awaited them together. Always together. The storm broke near dawn, the wind falling away to leave a silence so complete it felt like the world holding its breath. Caleb woke stiff and cold despite having slept near the fire's dying embers. Gray light filtered through gaps in the cabin walls, revealing their shelter in harsh detail. The old trapper's cabin was worse than he remembered. The roof sagged dangerously in places, gaps between logs wide enough to push a fist through. The floor rotted and treacherous. It had served its purpose, but they could not stay here long. Ruth stirred between him and Naira, her small face pale in the dawn light. Caleb touched her forehead, warm but not feverish. Good. The child had survived the night march better than he had hoped. Naira was already awake, crouched by the broken door, looking out at the transformed landscape. Fresh snow had buried everything smooth and pristine, beautiful and deadly. "No tracks," she said quietly. "Storm erased our path completely." "How deep is it?" 2 feet, maybe more in drifts. She turned to face him. "This slows us, also slows them. But when Tully discovers we are gone, he will search. He will find this place eventually." Caleb knew she was right. There were only so many places to shelter in this country. Tully knew the region well enough to start checking the obvious locations. They had bought themselves time, nothing more. "We move as soon as Ruth wakes and eats something. Push hard for the capital. It's 40 miles from here. Closer to 50, through mountains, in winter." Naira's expression was grim. 3 days at best, maybe 4 or 5 with child in this snow. Then we better get started. Ruth woke to the smell of salt pork warming over the rekindled fire. She sat up slowly, wincing at sore muscles. "Papa, where are we?" "Safe cabin. We made it through the storm." Caleb handed her a piece of the warm meat and a chunk of bread. "Eat quickly. We need to move soon." "Are the bad men still chasing us?" "Yes, but they don't know where we are. Not yet." Ruth chewed thoughtfully, her eyes too old for her face. 5 years old, and already she understood that safety was temporary, that danger could find you anywhere. It broke Caleb's heart even as he recognized the harsh necessity of it. They ate a cold breakfast, saving fuel and avoiding smoke that might give away their position. Caleb checked their supplies. Food for maybe 3 more days if they were careful. Ammunition still adequate. The real concern was exposure. The temperature had dropped further with the storm's passage. Clear skies meant brutal cold. "We follow the ridgeline north," Naira said, tracing a path in the dirt floor with her finger. "Stay in trees where possible. Avoid open ground. 2 days to Eagle Pass, then down into Valley where capital is." "You know this country?" "I know all country in this territory. Had to. When you are hunted, you learn every hiding place, every game trail, every path between settlements." She looked up at him. "I have run for many years, Caleb. Always running. Until you." The statement hung between them, weighted with meaning Caleb was not sure how to address. Before he could respond, a sound carried across the morning air. Distant, but unmistakable. Voices. Men calling to each other. Caleb moved to the door and peered out carefully. Through the trees, perhaps half a mile distant, he saw movement. Riders. 4 of them spread out searching. "They found the cabin already," he breathed. "How?" "They did not find." "They guess," Naira said. "Tully know this land. He used it for his operation before. Move stolen children through mountains to Mexico. He know every cabin, every hiding place." Her voice was bitter. "I should have thought of this. We were predictable. We need to go. Now." They gathered their meager supplies in frantic silence. Caleb helped Ruth into her layers of clothing while Naira scattered the fire, eliminating smoke. They left through the cabin's back wall where several logs had rotted away, completely emerging into deep snow that immediately soaked through their boots. The voices were getting closer. Caleb could make out words now. "Check inside, I'll circle around back." No time for stealth. They plunged into the forest, moving as quickly as the snow allowed. Ruth struggled, her short legs sinking deep despite the snowshoes. Caleb grabbed her under the arms and lifted her, carrying her against his chest. She wrapped her arms and legs around him, making herself as small as possible. Behind them, a shout. "Here, fresh tracks! They just left!" The pursuit was on. Caleb ran, his lungs burning in the frigid air. Naira moved beside him with the fluid grace of someone raised in wilderness, her steps barely disturbing the snow. Trees flashed past, branches whipped at their faces. Ruth buried her face against Caleb's shoulder, silent and trusting. Gunshots cracked through the forest. Bullets smacked into tree trunks, spraying bark. Too close. Much too close. "Split up," Naira gasped. "They cannot follow both trails. Meet at Eagle Pass." "No, we stay together. Ruth will die if we do not reach help. You know this." Naira's eyes were fierce, determined. "I lead them away. You get her to safety. This is only way." She did not wait for his agreement. Naira veered left, moving fast, making noise, deliberately leaving obvious tracks, drawing the hunters toward her and away from Caleb and Ruth. "Naira!" Caleb shouted. But she was gone, vanished into the timber with 4 armed men riding after her. Caleb stood frozen, torn between the urge to follow and the child in his arms. Ruth lifted her head, looked at him with Helen's eyes. "Papa, we have to go. We have to get help for Naira." The child was right. The only way to help Naira now was to reach the capital, to bring back real authority. Caleb turned and ran in the opposite direction, angling north toward Eagle Pass and the distant promise of salvation. He ran until his legs threatened to give out, until Ruth's weight felt like iron in his arms, until his chest burned and his vision blurred. Finally he stopped in a small clearing, gasping, and set Ruth down gently. "Are they still chasing us?" Ruth asked, looking back the way they had come. Caleb listened. Nothing. No voices, no hoofbeats, just the vast silence of the forest and the mountains beyond. "I don't think so." Naira led them away. "Will she be okay?" Caleb wanted to lie, to offer false comfort, but he had never lied to his daughter, and he would not start now. "I don't know, sweetheart, but she's smart and tough. If anyone can survive out here, it's her." They rested briefly, then pushed on. The terrain grew steeper as they climbed toward Eagle Pass. Caleb's legs screamed with every step, muscles pushed beyond their limits. But he could not stop. Would not stop. Not while Ruth depended on him. The day wore on. The sun climbed higher, offering light but little warmth. They saw no sign of pursuit, but Caleb knew that meant nothing. Tully's men could be anywhere, circling around, setting up an ambush. By late afternoon they reached a frozen stream. Caleb studied it, trying to remember the maps he had seen years ago. This should be Willow Creek, which meant Eagle Pass was close, maybe 2 more hours of climbing. "Papa, I'm tired," Ruth said softly. "I know, baby, but we have to keep going, just a little further." "I can walk. You don't have to carry me." Caleb looked at his daughter, at the determination in her small face, and felt pride swell in his chest. "Okay, we walk together, but you tell me if you need to stop." They followed the creek upward, using the ice as a path. Easier than fighting through the deep snow, but treacherous. Caleb slipped twice, barely catching himself. Ruth moved more carefully, testing each step. The pass opened before them as the sun touched the western peaks. A natural gap between mountains, wind scoured and relatively clear of snow. Beyond it, Caleb could see the valley descending toward civilization. Toward help. "We made it," he said, relief flooding through him. "Ruth, we made it." She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen in days. "Can we rest now?" "Yes, we'll camp here tonight. Start down in the morning when we're fresh." Caleb found a sheltered spot among the rocks and built a small fire, carefully positioning it so the flames were hidden from below. They ate the last of their food, rationing it carefully. Tomorrow they would have nothing, but tomorrow they would reach the valley. Find a ranch or a town. Get help. As darkness fell, Ruth curled against Caleb's side, her breathing evening into sleep. Caleb stared up at the stars brilliant and cold in the clear sky and thought about Naira. Had she escaped? Was she still running? Or had Tully's men caught her? The not knowing gnawed at him. She had sacrificed herself to give them a chance, had drawn the hunters away like a mother bird feigning injury to protect her young, family protecting family. "Please let her be alive," Caleb whispered to the stars. "Please." The stars offered no answer, just their ancient, indifferent light. He must have slept because he woke suddenly to Ruth shaking his shoulder. "Papa, Papa, someone's coming." Caleb grabbed his rifle and rolled to his feet, instantly alert. Dawn was breaking, painting the snow pink and gold, and climbing toward them from the valley side of the pass was a group of riders. His heart sank. Tully had gotten ahead of them, somehow cut them off, but as the riders drew closer, Caleb realized these were not Tully's men. They wore uniforms, blue wool cavalry uniforms with brass buttons gleaming in the early light. Soldiers. Real soldiers. The lead rider raised his hand in greeting as they approached. "Hello, the camp. We're U.S. Cavalry out of Fort Harrison. Are you folks in trouble?" Caleb nearly collapsed with relief. Yes. Yes, we're in trouble. There are men hunting us, outlaws. We need help." The officer dismounted, his weathered face concerned. "I'm Lieutenant Hayes. We've been tracking a group of suspicious riders in this area. Got reports of gunfire yesterday. Tell me what's happened." Caleb explained quickly. Vernon Tully. The attack on his ranch. Naira and her connection to the child trading operation. Their flight through the storm. Naira leading the hunters away. Hayes listened intently, his expression growing darker. "Vernon Tully. We know that name. There's a federal warrant for his arrest. Multiple counts of kidnapping and human trafficking. We've been trying to locate him for months." "Then you'll help us. You'll help find Naira." "We'll do better than that. We'll bring Tully and his men in chains." Hayes turned to his sergeant. "Split the unit. Half with me back the way these folks came. Half escort Mr. Morrison and his daughter to the fort. Move fast." Within minutes, Caleb and Ruth were mounted on cavalry horses, blankets wrapped around them, riding down toward the valley with an armed escort. Behind them, Hayes and 6 soldiers disappeared back up the pass, following the tracks toward where Naira had led the hunters. "Will they find her?" Ruth asked, her arms tight around Caleb's waist. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The ride down seemed to take forever, and no time at all. Caleb's exhausted mind struggled to process that they were actually safe, that help had arrived just when hope was fading. It felt like a dream too good to be real. Fort Harrison appeared in the valley below a sturdy collection of buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. Smoke rose from chimneys. The American flag snapped in the wind. Civilization. Safety. Everything they had been fighting to reach. They were taken immediately to the post commander, a graying colonel named Marsh, who listened to Caleb's full story with growing anger. "Child trafficking operating in my territory," Marsh growled. "On my watch. This Tully will answer for his crimes, Mr. Morrison. You have my word. I just want the Apache woman found safe. She saved our lives, multiple times. If she's alive, Hayes will find her. He's the best tracker I've got." Marsh stood. "In the meantime, you and your daughter need food rest and medical attention. My wife will see to you." The next hours passed in a blur. Hot food, the first real meal in days. A warm bath that turned the water black with grime. Clean clothes. A soft bed in the guest quarters. Ruth fell asleep almost instantly, her small body finally able to relax. Caleb sat beside her, watching her sleep, barely able to believe they were actually safe. A knock at the door. Caleb opened it to find a young private standing at attention. "Sir, Lieutenant Hayes has returned. He's asking for you." Caleb's heart jumped. "Did he find her? Did he find Naira?" "You better come see for yourself, sir." Caleb followed the private across the compound to the infirmary. His mind raced through possibilities. She was injured. She was dead. They had not found her at all. He pushed through the door and stopped. Naira sat on a cot, her arm being bandaged by a medic. She was alive. Bruised, exhausted, but alive. And beside her, holding her hand with fierce possession, was a boy, maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and eyes that held both Apache heritage and something else. Naira looked up as Caleb entered. Tears streamed down her face. "Caleb," she said, her voice breaking, "this is Cale, my son. I find him. After all these years, I find my son." The world seemed to tilt. Caleb moved closer, looking at the boy, who stared back with solemn intensity. The child spoke first, his voice small but clear. "Good afternoon, sir." Perfect English. No trace of an accent. The words of a schoolboy reciting a lesson. Naira's face crumpled at the sound. "They take everything from him," she whispered. "His language, his name, his memory of me." Fresh tears fell. "At that camp they call him Kyle. They beat him when he speak Apache. They tell him his mother is savage, dead. They make him ashamed." Caleb knelt before the boy, meeting his eyes. "Your real name is Cale. It means sparrow hawk in your mother's language. She never stopped looking for you. Not for one day." The boy blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Cale." He tested the word carefully, as if it might break. "That was my name." "That is your name," Naira said, reaching for his hand. "Your true name." Cale stared at their joined hands. "I don't remember," he whispered. "I don't remember any Apache words. They said forgetting was good. They said I was being saved." "You were not being saved," Naira said fiercely. "You were being stolen, but no more. Now you come home. Your son. But I thought he was dead too. Sold when he was baby. But Hayes and his men, they find camp where Tully's men are hiding. They find Keel there, prisoner, being held for ransom or sale." Fresh tears fell. "My son, alive, after 5 years thinking him gone." Lieutenant Hayes stepped forward. "We caught Tully and his remaining men at the camp, all in custody. They were using that boy as leverage, planning to lure his mother into a trap." He smiled grimly. "Didn't quite work out how they planned." Caleb sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "Is Ruth—" "She's safe, sleeping." Hayes put a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Morrison. You got her to safety. You both did." Later that evening, after Caleb had rested, he brought Ruth to the infirmary. The little girl had woken, asking about Naira, insisting she needed to see her aunt immediately. Ruth stopped in the doorway when she saw the boy sitting on the cot beside Naira. She gripped Caleb's hand tighter. "Ruth," Naira said gently, "come, meet Cale, my son, your cousin." Ruth approached slowly, her doll clutched against her chest. She studied the boy with the frank curiosity of children. "Hello, I'm Ruth." Cale looked at her, then at the doll in her arms. "That's a nice doll. Naira made the dress, well, the new one. Mama made the doll before she—" Ruth's voice trailed off. Then with the resilience of childhood she brightened. "Do you like dolls?" "I don't know. I never had one." Cale's voice was quiet, uncertain. Ruth considered this grave injustice for a moment, then made a decision. She sat down beside him on the cot and held out the doll. "You can hold her if you want. Her name is Sarah, like my grandma I never met." Cale took the doll carefully, as if it might break. For the first time since the soldiers had found him, something in his face softened. "Are you scared?" Ruth asked bluntly. The question seemed to surprise him. "Yes, very scared." "Me too. Papa and I ran through a big storm and bad men chased us, and it was really scary." She swung her legs, her heels thumping against the cot. "But Papa says being scared is okay. He says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Cale thought about this. "Your papa sounds wise." "He is, and Naira is really brave too. She saved us." Ruth tilted her head, studying him. "She's your mama and my aunt, so that makes us family now. Cousins. Family, Cale repeated, testing the word. He had been alone for so long the concept felt foreign. Yes, and Papa says family stays together, no matter what. Ruth nodded with absolute certainty. So you're going to stay with us. We're going back to Papa's ranch. There's chickens and cows and lots of snow. Do you like snow? For the first time since being found, Cale smiled, small, tentative, but real. I think I used to. I don't remember. Then we'll make new memories, Ruth declared. Good ones. Naira watched her daughter's child and her own son sitting together, heads bent over the doll, and felt something break open in her chest. Helen's daughter teaching her son how to belong again. Family, healing, family. Caleb stood in the doorway watching the same scene and knew with absolute certainty that they were doing the right thing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. All of them. Caleb looked at Naira and her son reunited after years of separation. Thought about Ruth sleeping peacefully down the hall. Thought about Helen and the secrets she had kept the family she had lost and never found again. But they had found it. Against all odds, through winter storms and bullets and desperate flight, they had found family. What happens now? Caleb asked. Now, Hayes smiled. Now you heal, you rest, and then you decide what comes next. Together. 3 weeks later, spring was beginning to show itself in the valley. Ice melted from the streams. The first brave flowers pushed through snow. And at Fort Harrison's small chapel, Reverend Grant performed a ceremony that would have been unthinkable just months before. Caleb Morrison stood in his best clothes, cleaned and mended. Beside him stood Naira, wearing a simple dress provided by Colonel Marsh's wife. Between them, Ruth held a small bouquet of early wildflowers, her face glowing with happiness. And next to Ruth stood Cale, serious and quiet, slowly learning to trust these strangers who had become family. Do you, Caleb Morrison, take Naira as your lawful wife? Caleb looked at the woman who had burst into his life during a blizzard, who had fought beside him, who had sacrificed herself for his daughter, the sister of his first wife, the mother of a child who carried the blood of the man Helen had truly loved. It was complicated, messy, nothing like the simple life he had once imagined. It was perfect. I do. Do you, Naira, take Caleb as your lawful husband? Naira's English had improved dramatically in the weeks at the fort. She spoke clearly, her voice strong. I do. Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. They kissed gently, more promise than passion, a beginning rather than a culmination. Ruth cheered. Cale smiled shyly. The small gathering of soldiers and officers applauded. Afterward there was a modest celebration. Cake provided by the fort's cook, music from a corporal who played fiddle, dancing and laughter, and the sense that something right had happened in a world that often felt wrong. As the sun set, Caleb stood outside the chapel with his new family. Ruth and Cale were chasing each other in the grass, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Naira leaned against his shoulder, her hand in his. What do we do now? She asked. Your ranch is damaged. Winter is ending but not ended. Where do we go? Caleb had been thinking about this. We go home. Back to the ranch. We rebuild what was damaged. We make it stronger. We make it ours. All of ours. And Tully, when he stands trial, we testify, we see justice done, and then we move forward. He looked at the children playing at the future they represented. Helen wanted Ruth to know her heritage, to know family. We'll honor that. We'll teach both children about where they come from, Apache and white, both parts of who they are. Naira was quiet for a moment. You are good man, Caleb Morrison. Better than I deserve. You're wrong. We deserve each other. We deserve this chance. He turned to face her. We've both lost so much. Helen, your years of freedom, the life we thought we'd have. But maybe we can build something better from what's left. Not perfect, but real, honest. Together. The word echoed across the valley, carried on wind that smelled of melting snow and new grass. Together, a promise and a choice. A family forged by sacrifice, courage, and the decision to stand together. Ruth ran up, breathless and happy. "Papa Cale wants to know if we can teach him to read. Can we?" "Of course we can. We'll teach him everything we know." Cale approached shyly, still uncertain of his place in this new constellation of people. Naira knelt and pulled him close, speaking softly in Apache. The boy's face relaxed and he nodded. "What did you tell him?" Caleb asked. "I tell him he is home now, that these people are his family, that he is safe." Naira stood wiping her eyes. "I tell him what I wish someone had told me years ago, that the running is over, that we can finally rest." The four of them stood together as darkness fell, watching the first stars appear. Somewhere to the south, Vernon Tully sat in a cell awaiting trial. Somewhere farther, Helen rested in her grave, her secrets finally revealed, and her family finally united. And here in this moment, a new family began, built on ashes and loss, strengthened by storm and struggle, bound by choice rather than obligation. Not perfect, but theirs. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.